I told him to get up and there's some needs I did.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
You want any kind of introduction? Or?
Well,
It's on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for coming down, everybody. If you're not, this is your first time in the bookstore. I think most of you have been here before, but we'd like to have events like this all the time. And we'd like to have people actually be involved in them, like you guys are tonight. So if you want to sign up on our email list at the counter, we have an email list, and we'll shoot you an email every so often just to tell you about the events going on here. But thanks for coming out tonight. And I'm going to introduce Kevin Smith, who's been a long-time activist here in town, and most of you know his work. Was a former producer for Alex Jones's program, and he's going to introduce Bob. So let's hear it for Kevin.
okay, we're going to start the roll right here.
Kind of got to synchronize this a little bit with the internet stream, so bear with us for a couple seconds.
Okay, we're starting right now. 30 seconds.
We'd like to welcome everyone to Brave New Books. This is Brave New Bookstore. You can look us up on the web at bravenewbookstore.com. We're located at 1904 Guadalupe Drive, right in the heart of downtown Austin near UT. And I'm honored tonight to have been asked to introduce our speaker tonight, and that's the Lieutenant Colonel and Dr. Bob Bowman. And I'll give you a brief bio. It's got to be brief because if I did the whole thing, we'd be here all night. But, you know, we worry a lot of times, people, you know, the Mark Twain quotes about patriots, you know, and they're scarce and they're scorned and all that till it becomes easy, and then everybody wants to join you. And right now we're seeing a variation on that. They're not ready to get on our side, but they are willing to join us to subvert us. And we all saw it at the recent tea parties here in Austin and around the country. They've decided to steal all our good works and our good themes. And, you know, me and a group of people did a little ambush journalism on William Crystal a couple years ago. And it was just when the YouTube and the Google video phenomenon was coming out, and it was nothing new. Lots of people have done it and for over the years, but we had this new technology at our disposal. We weren't that smart. We just kind of fell into it. But we confronted William Crystal. We really dressed him down. And on those actions, a group in New York that came from the splintered 9/11 Truth Group started the group called We Are Change. And they went around and used those same techniques, and even to a higher degree in the Big Apple, the center of the world, and really let not only politicians but the people behind the scenes running things let them have it. And so we saw Obama come on the scene, and his term was hope. It was always hope for this. And once you started seeing the effect of the We Are Change group, you saw change adopted by Obama. So can't beat him. We'll just join them and take their words. And then we had a thing called the 9/11 Commission report that came out that was, the Warren Commission Jr., or even probably a bigger lie. And it was roundly repudiated, and one of the very first actions against it was called the Tea Party. And Colonel Bowman was one of the original people. I remember the photos of him in his tri-cornered hat. And Bob, were you in Boston or Philadelphia?
Boston. In
Boston, so the real place for it. And it happened all across the country. So we threw the 9/11 Commission in the nearest body of water we could find. And then when Dr. Paul was convinced to run for president, you saw a lot of Ron Paul people were also 9/11 truthers. And, that was a good and a bad thing for him, but I think he dealt with it in a very good fashion. But we saw a Tea Party spring out of that because it was something we had in the 9/11 Truth movement. So they were roundly successful, and everybody loved it. And now we've seen the Glenn Becks and the Hannitys and the O'Reillys jump on these Tea Parties. And you go to them now, and there's still a neocon contingent out there that's stealing all of our lingo. And boy, they really don't like it when the originators show up and try to steal it back. But so I wanted to talk about that we have to look to the patriots, and we'll always tell you, you don't need leaders. It's a leaderless revolution. They can't kill all of us, so we have to have many heads. But at the same time, we do need leaders. We need sages and statesmen out there and people that we can look to and say, well, this guy's been doing it for 30 plus years, straight, and I've done it for 10 years and I'm about burned out, and I don't, how can I keep going? How can I keep sacrificing my well-being and my livelihood to do the right thing? Well, Colonel Bowman's a classic example of doing the right thing, and our good friend Sully Castillo right now is about to go to federal prison, and this is the DEA agent whistleblower during Iran-Contra, and he did the right thing, and he passed up millions of dollars in laundered drug money. He could have been Oliver North. He could have been the same guy, but he did the right thing, and we've got to use these people as examples to us to not give up and not quit and keep going forward. And I can read you a little bit of this bio, and I will do that, but it's too lengthy. Everyone go to the Patriots, thepatriots.us, and you can get all the information on that, and Bob will surely plug that too. But Dr. Robert Bowman is president of the Institute of Space and Security Studies. He's executive vice president of the Millennium II Corporation and retired presiding archbishop of the United Catholic Church. He's the recipient of the Eisenhower Medal, the George F. Kennan Peace Prize, the President's Medal of Veterans for Peace, the Republic Aviation Air Power Award. Oh, Republic Aviation, that's a name from the past. The Society of American Military Engineers, ROTC Award of Merit twice, the Air Medal with 5 oak leaf clusters. So basically he was awarded the Air Medal 5 times, guys, and numerous other awards. Until July 82, he was the vice president of the Space Communications Company. Before that, Dr. Bowman was manager of the Advanced Space Programs at General Dynamics, responsible for communications spacecraft product line. Culminating in a 22-year Air Force career in 1978, Colonel Bowman was director of Advanced Space Programs and Development of the Air Force Space Division. That's what we call Star Wars now. And I'll just let you guys go to the rest of this information, his multiple PhDs, the multiple universities he's taught at, and he can bring you up to date on that too. But, here's a guy that was doing something. He was probably caught up in the technology. Bob, and I'll let you address that. They compartmentalize you and you get caught up in the minutia. But when it became apparent to him that this was not a defensive shield necessarily as it was built, this was going to be aggressive and offensive, he left the reservation. He became a non-company man at that point by telling the truth and bucking the system. And I don't know how much before that Bob's patriotic streak was, but it surely came out then. And I'm going to relate some information to you that how I think about Bob. When we were trying to get momentum for 9/11 Truth, we thought, well, if we can convince enough people, a certain percentage of people with the facts, that we're going to win, and I have to reassess that belief now, because we've seen the people that could have used it to their advantage, and they chose not to. They chose to just wait their turn to get into power and then disregard all the facts and everything. But we had plenty of people like myself and people like Alex Jones that could give you some sizzle, but we needed steak. We needed PhDs. We needed doctors and military men to join the cause. And when Charlie Sheen sent an email to Alex's office, and then I talked to him the next day, and he outlined what he had planned, I thought, well, there's a guy out there, there's Stephen Jones, there's Webster Tarpley, there's Colonel Bob Bowman. These are people on a short list that have to be included in this, And so they gave us credibility. They gave us not just being loudmouth, conspiracy theorist types. They gave us credibility. And in my claim to fame, I guess if I have one, is that I hammered the C-SPAN people relentlessly. I was polite and I was firm, and then I left them with a pretty real threat on what we could do to their show on their call-in lines if they refused to come cover this thing. So they agreed to come to LA and cover the panel discussion that was done Sunday. And when they were filming it, I was literally pinching myself saying, there is no way they can ever air this. There's no way. And they held off for a little over a month, and when they finally did air it, I think 5 times in 4 days, and then a couple other times that we kind of lost track of later in the month, it was the most downloaded, the most uploaded, the most requested, the most viewed thing in C-SPAN history. And it really kind of put it into a level of academia, into the intelligentsia, where it wasn't just wild-eyed kooks anymore talking about these possibilities. Hell, it was on C-SPAN. We've got to give it its due and weigh these things. So I think it really took a lot of steam out of their fear-baiting and their warmongering, and they had to really pull their horns back in for a little while. So thank the panel that we had, thank Alex Jones, Charlie Sheen, and C-SPAN, and everybody that made that perfect storm of information come about. And I'll always remember that morning when we set the panel, and you know, we were up in one of the camera guys' rooms, and we decided the people we wanted on the panel, and we were actually going down to film it that morning, and I rode down the elevator in that hotel with Colonel Bowman, and it was just us two, and it was in the hotel. You came down to the base floor, and then you had to go down these stairways. We were down in a basement, you know, we were down in a dungeon, a muggy dungeon, a big one. But I remember saying, you know, Colonel Bowman, you know, your role here, what you have to sell is that, you know, you're an interceptor pilot. You know the drill. You know, that's what we expect out of you, you know, and that's what we need out of you. And boy, did he deliver. I mean, did he deliver? And Stephen Jones, too. I mean, these guys that are so mild-mannered and meek, you know, when you see him put on his little plastic glove and picks up that piece of thermite, and I mean, it just is so powerful, you know, and what a combination. And Alex, you know, Alex tends to go on, you know, and tends to be a little bit interruptive of people, but boy, he did a fantastic job moderating that panel discussion. And I just remember, you know, Tarpley having to go, no, down, 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 telling people, hold your applause, no more standing ovations. We only have a limited amount of time to get this information out, so hold your applause. And it literally, these guys were like rock stars, you know, and when you saw the Hollywood contingent of people, the writers of Enemy of the State and things like that, just the glow in their face and how prideful they were of watching real patriots stand up and really fight the system. So, you know, that's what I just needed to share with you on a personal basis about how proud I was of what those men did that day. And it was a time that it really wasn't still very popular to talk about, and it was a very, you know, look what happened to Stephen Jones. Look what happened to these guys at the university level that had their careers ruined. So we owe them a great deal, and I can't think of anybody else more right now that we owe a great deal to than Colonel Bob Bowman. So let's hear it for him, and Colonel, let's knock us on our butts. Give us the straight skinny, all right?
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you all for coming. I'd like to get an idea who we have here. How many of you folks are Ron Paul folks? All right. How many of you are Dennis Kucinich folks? Yes, yes, and most of the same folks, and you're exactly right, because we, the American people, have been artificially divided for so very long by the global elite who want us divided left and right, Republican and Democrat, conservative and liberal, and they have artificially divided us, and they've used those silly hot-button issues, you know, abortion, gay rights, gun control, prayer in schools, and they don't care about those issues. What they care about is having a government that serves their financial interests. A government that will fight an aggressive war to secure a gas pipeline for them. A government that will sign a so-called trade deal in order to drive down wages and drive up their profits. And they get that, regardless of which party is in power, because they own both the major political parties at the national level. And they just divvy up those hot-button issues to divide us. And now we're coming together, and the fact that so many of you folks recognize that Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich, supposedly at opposite extremes of the political spectrum, are the good guys who have come together to fight our battles for us, to honor the Constitution, to honor the truth, to serve the people. Those are the kind of people we need in our government. And all the rest of them, regardless of party, the ones that serve the corporate interests and not us, we have to just get rid of them. Because we, the people, are not left and right. We are one. We have the same issues, the same needs, the same fears. We both love our country, but fear our government, and with darn good reason. So I'm glad to see that so many of you here tonight are either both left and right or neither. What we have to get away from is this radical center represented by the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderbergers and all that, who really don't care about true conservative issues like standing for fiscal responsibility and avoiding foreign military entanglements and protecting the individual rights of Americans. They don't care about real liberal values like compassion and equal chance for everybody and giving workers a fair share of the wealth they create with their labor. They don't care about either of those. All they care about is their own greed and power. And so we, the people, from left, right, and all over the political spectrum, are coming together to take back America. And we recognize that it's not a matter of just making sure you get the right political party in there. It doesn't matter. We have been done in by the fascists in both major political parties. And when I'm out there beyond you well-informed folks, I have to deal with Democrats who think, oh, there's no problem anymore. Obama's in there. And I have to deal with Republicans that say, I want Bush back. He was right on everything. We know better. Now, my career as a truth teller, a myth buster, a whistleblower, goes back quite a long time. I've been doing it full time now for 27 years. And it's a long time to go without a paycheck. Fortunately, I get some help, especially the last couple of years when the VA has finally recognized the fact that I'm a 100% disabled combat veteran, and because of the cancer I have from Agent Orange. And of course, they didn't expect me to live this long, neither did the doctors, but I'm still at it. Now, my career as a whistleblower doesn't go back quite as far as it should, because I first noticed the problem when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And probably a lot of you did too. I mean, who can watch the film of Kennedy's head snapping back from the fatal shot and his wife climbing up on the back of the car trying to retrieve parts of his skull and brain, and still believe that the only shots came from behind, from a lone gunman in the school depository building? It's ludicrous. It's about as ludicrous as watching the BBC announce the collapse of Building 7 before it happened, and then watching the building come down in what appears to be a perfect controlled demolition of an intact building with no visible fires, and still believe the Bush administration's official conspiracy theory about 9/11. Now, when the JFK thing happened, I read all the books on it, and I saw Oliver Stone's movie and whatnot, but I didn't do anything. Oh, I talked to some of my friends and family, but I didn't step out. But with 9/11, I was already out fighting Reagan's Star Wars scheme. I'd been unemployed and a permanent whistleblower already for a long time, 19 years. And so I had nothing to lose to continue speaking out on yet something else. And I did. But you see, there's a big difference in the public knowledge of these two things, because in 1963 we still had some free press out there. And so just about every American who was alive in 1963 has heard of the grassy knoll. But other than you folks here in the choir, almost no American alive in 2001 has heard about Building 7. I've lobbied in Congress, gone to the Senate, take my 3-minute smoking gun video, as I call it, about the Building 7. It's just 3 minutes long. It shows the BBC announcing the collapse of Building 7 before it happened, you know, with the building clearly visible over Jane Stanley's shoulder, still standing. It shows Larry Silverstein talking about his decision to pull it. And then it shows about a dozen views of Building 7 coming down from a lot of different angles, no visible fires, all the rest of that. I showed that, as a matter of fact, to Obama's chief of staff when Obama was still a senator and candidate. I only got to talk to Obama for a few seconds, but I had his chief of staff for over an hour. And I put that DVD in, and he sat there and he watched that with me. He had never heard of Building 7. And he's chief of staff for who is now the most powerful man on earth. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we've got work to do. We have to spread the truth, because our country cannot exist unless we destroy these government myths and expose the truth. And now with Obama expanding the war in Afghanistan, spreading it into Pakistan, keeping the Patriot Act alive and the Military Commissions Act, and rendition is still going on, and the threat of martial law is still there, and we still have concentration camps sitting there waiting for us dissidents. And our constitutional rights are still being taken away from us. And why all this, when it seems so opposite to the change we can believe in that we were promised? It's because of 9/11, he says. We have to fight this war in Afghanistan because of 9/11. We have to do this because of 9/11. It should be clear to us all that we in the 9/11 truth movement are absolutely essential, because until we explode the government myth and get out the truth, all these evils will continue no matter who is president, though it's up to us. Now, one of the things I did, and I'm going to skip 18 pages of speech here, and go to my conclusion, because I wrote an inaugural address for President Obama last December, and I sent it to him. Now, I heard a few phrases that sounded a little familiar, but basically he didn't use it. But if we, the people, want the real changes that we need, not the chump change we've been given so far, we must demand it. We must let President Obama know exactly what we want. And we must make it possible for him to do it. It's just like Franklin Delano Roosevelt told the unions after he was elected. The unions went to him and said, you know, we've been downtrodden for so long, we've been suffering from these robber barons, and they've just, sicked the dogs on us, and machine guns and everything else, and We can't live on the wages these corporations are paying us. We need this, we need that, we need this, we need that. And FDR said, I agree with you. Now you go out there and make me do it. Because FDR knew that he couldn't make those changes unless there was a powerful demand from the people. Otherwise, he couldn't get away with it. Obama is no different. I think he has some good instincts. I think he's a good man of heart. But he has surrounded himself with agents of the status quo. Just about every advisor and cabinet secretary is a member of the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, or the Council on Foreign Relations, and some, all three. And so we have to have a vision of what it is we want, and we have to push that vision. So here's my vision of the future, and I'd like you to pretend with me now that you and the assembled members of Congress are listening to the President of the United States at his inauguration. My fellow Americans, our many problems are not due to incompetence or inexperience or a government that's too big or too small, but because those in government have not been serving us. They've served their corporate masters and benefactors and have deliberately chosen policies which harm our nation and our people. Those of us who dedicate our lives to peace, economic justice, and environmental preservation can make little progress in our struggles so long as ultimate power is in the hands of those who profit from war, poverty, and pollution. But here comes the good news. Today, that power has come to an end. As long as I am President of the United States, this government will serve the needs of the people, not the greeds of the wealthy elite. Now, turning things around won't be easy. What our Constitution empowers me to change, I shall, and I'll do it fast. But for much of what needs doing, I'll need the cooperation of you in Congress, and I ask for it today. You see, this Constitution does not make me the decider, only the proposer and the implementer. You, the people's representatives in Congress, are the deciders. I am therefore vacating all the over 1,100 signing statements imposed by my predecessor. I'm revoking Presidential Directives 20 and 51, which give me dictatorial powers. I ask for the repeal of the misnamed Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, and all the martial law and special and dictatorial powers acts passed in the last 8 years. This is not a dictatorship. Today, we the people once again throw off the shackles of tyranny and take back our country and our Constitution. Now, restoring the Constitution means ending the imperial presidency and returning power to the people's representatives. But I warn you, members of Congress, if you continue to violate your constitutional responsibility to serve your constituents and instead serve only yourselves and the big money interests you are indebted to, I will go over your heads to the people and ask them to retire all of you, regardless of party. In order to restore some semblance of our republic, we must give the people real choices, not false ones. And we must have an informed electorate, not a brainwashed electorate. This means electoral reform and media reform. Now, first, electoral reform. The constitutional principle of one person, one vote means that any method of voting which does not produce a paper ballot that can be counted and recounted and audited as necessary is unconstitutional. I ask Congress and the states to return to paper ballots and institute full public financing of elections, proportional representation, preference voting, sometimes called instant runoff voting, abolition of burdensome petition requirements on independents and third parties, and so working people can actually vote, making Election Day a federal holiday.
Yeah.
I also ask, now you may recognize that many of these reforms are intended to empower third parties. There is nothing democratic about a two-party system when both parties are owned at the highest level by the same powerful interests. I also ask Congress to quickly pass a constitutional amendment restoring the original meaning of this document. The amendment says, corporations and other fictitious entities are not persons under this Constitution and shall have none of the rights and privileges thereof. And now, media reform. I'm ordering the Federal Communications Commission to immediately reinstate the ban on ownership of multiple media outlets. It's time for a return to family-owned newspapers and radio and television stations. The monopoly media conglomerates must sell off their assets immediately. Sorry, Mr. Murdoch. You see, the key to ending fascism is to separate big money and political power, and we're taking steps to do just that. I've asked the Justice Department to indict members of the previous administration, including the former President and Vice President, as war criminals. They exploited the 9/11 tragedy to deceive this nation into unnecessary and illegal wars of aggression against Afghanistan and Iraq. They abused their power and violated the Constitution and their oath of office. The evidence of their guilt is absolutely overwhelming. Now, when I was sworn in, as every other president and military officer, I promised to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that includes a renegade president and vice president. Now, if I or any member of my administration ever gives illegal orders such as we have seen lately, I expect the military to refuse them and to take action against us. Your duty to the Constitution far exceeds any perceived loyalty to any individual. The real question is why you members of Congress failed to perform your constitutional duty by impeaching these criminals long ago. There's also evidence of a massive cover-up with respect to 9/11 itself. The official 9/11 report, tightly controlled by the Bush White House, amounts to little but a whitewash. When combined with the confiscation of videotapes, audio tapes, and black boxes and other evidence by the FBI, it is clear that regardless of who was responsible for 9/11, the subsequent cover-up was itself a conspiracy involving elements of the White House and the intelligence establishment. Of course, this raises the question, if the Bush administration had nothing to hide, why did they hide everything? Were they covering up guilt or incompetence? If it was incompetence, why was no one demoted or fired or court-martialed or even reprimanded? And if it was guilt, are the guilty parties Saudis, Pakistanis, Israelis, Americans, all of the above? And why on earth aren't the people's representatives in Congress asking these questions and demanding answers? The American people have still not been told who was really responsible for 9/11. Dedicated researchers have proven that it could not have happened the way the Bush administration said it did. Hijacked airliners do not fly around for an hour and 40 minutes without being intercepted, unless our air defense system was deliberately sabotaged. Indestructible black boxes, and they're not really black, they're bright orange, but never mind. Indestructible black boxes do not evaporate in the same fire from which an unharmed passport floats to the street below. Steel skyscrapers do not implode and collapse at free fall speed because of a kerosene fire. Steel buildings do not collapse at all because of a kerosene fire. Never have and never will. And Building 7 wasn't even struck by an airplane. Now, even if this wild official conspiracy theory of the Bush administration is essentially correct, you know, the one about 19 Arabs with box cutters and an old man on a dialysis machine in a cave. Even if that official conspiracy theory were essentially correct, the American people would still need to know, for example, why their trillion-dollar defense establishment was unable to protect even its own headquarters from an unarmed aircraft. The truth is, about 9/11, after 8 years, we still don't know the truth about 9/11, and we should. And so should the families of victims. I am therefore appointing a commission to conduct a new and truly independent investigation of 9/11. It will be co-chaired by Dr. David Ray Griffith and Stephen Jones and Richard Gage. Never again must we allow this nation to be stampeded into war under false pretenses. Now, 9/11 is not the only truth we're concerned about. There have been many other cover-ups, including the murders of a number of our soldiers in the field, most of them women. If the Pentagon won't do a proper investigation, we'll do it for them. Parents have a right to know what really happened to soldiers like Pat Tillman and Lavina Johnson. Now, most people have heard of Pat Tillman, football star turned war hero turned conscientious objector. The Army now says, well, yeah, he wasn't killed by the enemy, he was killed by friendly fire. What they don't tell you in the media, of course, is that there is evidence that most of the shots that hit Pat Tillman were fired from closer than 10 feet. That's not friendly fire, that's deliberate fragging. It's murder. But there are very few people out there who know about Lavina Johnson. How many of you have heard about Lavina Johnson? A few of you. Good. Well, Lavina Johnson was a lovely young American girl, African American, Christian, virgin, 18 years old. She volunteered to fight in Iraq. Her body was found in a Halliburton tent. Her body was shipped home in a sealed coffin. And her parents were told not to open the coffin. But her father is a surgeon, a physician. And he opened the coffin and examined his daughter. Her brains had been blown out. There were bruises all over her body. Her hands were badly burned, too badly burned, for example, to hold a gun. And acid had been poured on her genitals in an apparent attempt to destroy DNA evidence. The Army ruled it a suicide. A government that honors the truth must seek out the truth and then tell the truth. And that's what we are going to do. Now, we have at times, including I think the last few years, had a government with bad policies, but we're a good people. What we have long needed is a government which reflects the values and goodness of the American people. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which cooperates with big business to export our jobs and import cheap illegal labor, driving down wages for all American workers. Wages today are a third of what they were in the 1950s. We're taking steps to benefit American workers. I asked Congress to pass legislation indexing the minimum wage for inflation. placing tariffs on importation of goods manufactured by corporations who move jobs out of the country, and limiting the corporate income tax deduction for executive compensation to 20 times the salary of their lowest paid worker. You know, this is a free country. Corporations can pay their executives whatever they want, but we don't have to give them a tax deduction for it. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which violates international law in its conflicts and denies its own citizens their constitutional rights. I have therefore ordered the release of all those being detained without charge, the closure of the prison at Guantanamo Bay. We'll find somewhere else for Bush and Cheney, don't we? And the end of the rendition program in which suspects are kidnapped and taken to secret foreign prisons to be tortured. I've pardoned a host of political prisoners, including Leonard Peltier, Mumia Abu-Jamal, and Border Patrol agents Campion and Ramos. I'm also pardoning all those incarcerated for possession or use of marijuana. The failed war on drugs is over. All contracts for mercenaries, including all contracts with Blackwater, or as they call it now, Z, all these contracts are being canceled. This includes contracts with the DoD, the CIA, the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security, which, by the way, is being abolished.
There you go.
Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which promotes a globalization which depresses living standards at home and allows corporations to destroy the quality of life in banana republics and client states all over the world. The WTO, the IMF, and the World Bank have caused untold suffering. If we can't reform them, we will abolish them. With respect to our relationship with the government of Mexico, I have ordered the cancellation of the Security and Prosperity Partnership, or North American Union, abandonment of plans for a NAFTA superhighway, which would have cut Texas in half along I-35, and which it would have put nearly all American longshoremen and truckers out of work. And third, suspension of NAFTA completely until Mexico gives its workers union rights, protections for safety, health, and the environment, and wages at least matching the U.S. federal minimum wage. From now on, globalization will mean raising living standards in developing nations to match ours, not the other way around.
Yes.
Our values and goodness are not reflected by a system in which all our personal income taxes go to pay interest on a staggering national debt created out of thin air. The Constitution authorizes Congress to coin our money, not a private cartel. I ask Congress to eliminate the debt-based monetary system and to pass legislation abolishing the Federal Reserve. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which launches unnecessary wars of aggression. Consequently, I have asked the UN to send peacekeepers to Iraq and Afghanistan to do a job we simply can't do as an occupying army. You can't win an occupation. Whether or not the UN complies, within 3 months, we're going to support what's left of our troops by bringing them home while they're still alive. I've also ordered a permanent halt to the use of depleted uranium weapons. They will be destroyed and stored as the dangerous radioactive waste they really are. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which uses our money to train death squads in the techniques of torture, intimidation, and assassination. The School of the Americas, by whatever name they choose to call it, is closed. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which gives most favored nation status to the butchers of Tiananmen Square and places an illegal secondary embargo on the impoverished people of Cuba. The embargo of Cuba just ended. Now, I recognize that we need advance information on activities of Al-Qaeda and others who wish to do us harm. But our values and goodness are not reflected by, and our security is not enhanced by, an organization that promotes instability, insurrection, tyranny, torture, terrorism, murder, and war around the world in our name and with our money. John F. Kennedy and Jimmy Carter tried to reform the CIA so it would stick to gathering intelligence. They failed. I'm not going to try. As of this moment, I am abolishing the CIA. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which sends its working class youth around the world to kill the sons and daughters of working people in other countries. Our values and goodness are not reflected by sending our children to the Middle East to kill Arabs so the oil companies can profit from selling the oil under other people's sand, making us the target of terrorists. No more Iraqs, no more Kosovos, no more El Salvadors. These are not isolated incidents of stupidity. They're part of a long, bloody history of foreign policy being conducted for the financial benefit of the wealthy few. It's a new form of colonialism. It violates our Constitution. It endangers our national security, it mortgages our future, it sacrifices our children, and it will never happen again. As President, and I intend to make this permanent because it is constitutional, I will use the men and women in our armed forces to protect our borders and our people. Period. End of report. They will not be used to protect the financial interests of Bechtel, Folgers, Chiquita Banana, Exxon, and Halliburton. This one change in military mission, eliminating the mission of protecting the global financial interests of multinational corporations, will allow us to greatly enhance our national security and at the same time reduce our defense budget by 80%. This will be a step toward fiscal responsibility. I've ordered the Secretary of Defense to begin an immediate recall of our forces all around the world. Think of it, after 64 years, the occupation of Germany and Japan has finally come to an end. With the exception of small Marine detachments guarding our embassies, all our military will be home within 3 months, and all overseas bases will be returned to the host countries. Now, needless to say, there will be no nuclear attack on Iran. My new special envoy to the Middle East, Jimmy Carter, will be meeting with them to solve our differences. And once he's finished there, he will straighten out the Israelis and Palestinians. Our values and goodness are not reflected by a government which for decades has been in violation of its treaty responsibilities to disarmament. I've therefore ordered a halt to the design, testing, and production of nuclear weapons, and have directed the Secretary of State to open negotiations toward the rapid and total abolition of nuclear weapons. I'm unlikely to get there with you, but like Brother Martin, I have been to the mountaintop, and I have seen the promised land. What I have seen is an America in which every person, regardless of their race, creed, color, age, or sexual orientation is valued and lives in dignity. Every person is cared for, and every person is free to reach his or her full potential. It's an America in which every family can be supported by one wage earner with one job paying a living wage. It's an America in which health care is provided to all as a right through a single-payer national health program. You know, as a conservative, I happen to believe that the only fiscally responsible way to provide health care is to eliminate the profit, the overhead, the red tape, and the interference between doctor and patient of the insurance companies by taking them out of health care altogether. I see an America in which educators and teachers are highly valued and financially compensated accordingly. It's an America in which policemen, nurses, poets, firefighters, teachers, and garbage collectors can afford a good house in a nice neighborhood and live in comfort. Not just scientists, brain surgeons, CEOs, rock stars, lawyers, and basketball players. It's an America in which faith is respected, culture is preserved, the arts are supported, and the Constitution is actually followed. It's an America that seeks not to be king of the hill, nor subservient to the World Trade Organization, but to be a responsible, sovereign member of the family of nations. Nothing more and nothing less. An America that is free of the threat of terrorism, because it is no longer feared and hated. Because it no longer does hateful things to people all over the world. An America that leads the world, not just with military might, but with its vision, its compassion, its democracy, its productivity, its freedom, its standard of living, its care for the global environment, its treatment of its own people, and its goodness. That's the America I've seen. And above all, it is an America at peace with the world and with its own people. This is the kind of America I have seen, the America our people deserve, and the America we can build. Yes, we can. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you. I'm going to make 2 more changes right now. This will be the first inaugural address, followed by a question and answer period. And it will also be the first inaugural address, followed by taking up a collection. First thing that's going to happen, though, is my wife Maggie is going to distribute cards to everybody. One is a Patriot card, a blue card, that describes our organization, the Patriots. The card's a little out of date because we're calling for the impeachment of Bush and Cheney, but that's all right. We printed 25,000. We still got some left. It also serves as my personal business card. It has our home address, our home telephone number, my email address, and our website. So those cards are coming around. She's also passing out a white card, which is a sign-up card. And you sign up on this card to become a member of the Patriots. Now, it doesn't cost anything. We have no dues. What happens when you sign up is you get our newsletter. I have a few copies here this evening. You get about 2 a year, so you're not going to be inundated with these newsletters. But that's the reason for your snail mail address. Then the email address will get you maybe 5 or 6 email newsletters a year. Again, you know, we're not the kind of folks that send out 20 a day. You know, I get those, I know you get those. We don't do that. We're not going to inundate you. But 5 or 6 times a year, you'll get an email newsletter. So be very careful with your email address. It is our primary means of communication. But if we get one character wrong because we misread your writing, it won't work. And we will never know why, and you won't hear from us, and you will never know why. So please print very carefully your email address. Help us tell the difference between a 0 and an O, difference between a 1 and an L. And upper and lowercase don't matter, so you can use all block letters if you want to. But do print carefully. Another thing you might consider here in Austin is forming a chapter of the Patriots. We have chapters around the country. Again, there's no dues, but people do gather themselves together and get together to discuss these issues and to take actions as they see fit. And each chapter runs its own affairs. We don't dictate to them what they have to do. But we do provide them with a list of potential folks in their area, all those that are on our mailing list. And we will publish the contact person's contact information, address, phone number, email address. We'll publish that on our website so that people who are interested can get in touch with you. Now, as we do the questions and answers, Maggie will also pass a basket around. You can turn in the cards if you've finished filling them out. If you haven't, there'll be plenty of time later. And if you feel like putting in a contribution into the basket, that's fine too. Some of you have already done it in this nice clear box up here, and we appreciate it. We thank you. As far as I know, we're not getting our usual $1,000 donation to the Patriots up front here. I think what we get from you guys in contribution is it. So please be generous. If you have a checkbook with you, please write the check to the Patriots. Do we have any questions?
We have a microphone right over here. They can come up to the microphone.
Yep.
Yeah, as soon as he's finished with it. Before he's finished. Right here. I can switch that.
It's Colonel Bowman.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm Larry Falzetto. I used to have a fledgling little patriot group years ago in Rockford, Illinois called the Winnebago County Committee to Restore the Constitution.
Uh-huh.
We later joined the Constitutional Patriots. My question is, as I listened to you speak, I was pretty much in agreement with everything you said. But then you mentioned Jimmy Carter, and then a red flag kind of went up.
Yeah.
And
Jimmy Carter was a member of the Trilateral Commission as well. Zbigniew Brzezinski was his mentor, just as he is for Barack Obama. But Jimmy Carter saw the light partway through his presidency and tried to go against the Trilateral Commission. That's why, in essence, they took the presidency away from him.
Okay, that explains my question, because it sounded like a fly in the ointment there, you know, and where it says Jimmy Carter was part of the Bohemian Grove, or...
Well, you know, he was, for a time, he had been recruited into the Trilateral Commission for the specific purpose of running for the presidency. They wanted him, just as they recruited Bill Clinton, and just as they recruited Barack Obama. Some of these folks have tried to go their own way, and some have not. Some have for a little bit, like Bill Clinton for the first few months, and then gave up, and he went the course. He gave us NAFTA, he gave us the rape of Kosovo, and all the rest of it. So he did the bidding of his masters in the Trilateral Commission. Jimmy Carter was the other way around. He went along with him at first, and then he said he was too smart, and he figured out that this wasn't the right thing to do, and he tried to go the other way, and they squashed him like a bug, unfortunately.
And one final question. Do you think that Barack Obama will ever find his birth certificate? There's a lot of military men would like to know if they have a commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
Here's the question.
Yeah, the second question was about Barack Obama's birth certificate. I don't know the answer to that one. As far as I'm concerned, you know, right now he is President of the United States, is the only one we've got, and we have to make the best of it. and try to get him to do what he knows is right. And that at the moment is our best shot. And if it doesn't happen, we keep working, and we keep trying from the grassroots up, and we keep trying to educate our neighbors and our co-workers and our families, and work to get the electoral system changed at the local level and get people elected to state legislatures who will change the way we vote for president and members of Congress, because the Constitution, again, gives that power to the states. And eventually, we'll have a system where we control the government instead of these big money folks controlling the government. That's got to be our end game. And how long it takes depends on how much resistance we get and how hard we work. But that's our job. Another question. Yes, sir.
It was 20 years ago.
The mic is not only for the people in here, it's for the listening audience.
It was 20 years ago that the U.S. Air Force incinerated the two poorest, blackest sections of Panama City, Chorrillo and San Miguel. Was that genocide? Was that slum clearance? What's your take on it?
Well, the little rape of Panama, like all the others that have gone on, seems to have been meant primarily as a punishment for a CIA hireling dictator who got a little too independent. Just like Manuel Noriega, just like Saddam Hussein, and so many others. Certainly Osama bin Laden. It makes me wonder how much evil we're going to do and how many American lives we are going to lose mopping up after the CIA's mistakes. But I think that's my take on it. I don't think they had anything particular against those poor Panamanians, but they did what they had to do to punish and get rid of somebody who was no longer doing their bidding. There may be more to it than that, but that's all I know.
I got to test some weapons too, some new weapons.
Right. Do you need a pen?
Right now, it seems like the other side has all the money and bullets. What makes you think we can pull this off?
What other side has all the money and bullets?
The people we've been talking about all evening.
Yeah. Well, we have to remember, they may have the money. They don't have the bullets, because most of the bullets belong to people in the Army and the military services. And it's my belief that if some dictator of ours, we expected it from Dick Cheney, and it never did quite happen, but whether it's Barack Obama or somebody in the future, if they declare martial law and want to get all us dissidents rounded up and put in their concentration camps, who are they going to get to do the job? I believe that our military forces, our young men and women in the military, and the officers who control them, will circle us and point their guns outward to protect us from Blackwater. I'm thoroughly convinced that by far the members of the military recognize their duty to the Constitution. And this is further evidenced now by the Oath Keepers, which is an organization including active and retired military and law enforcement officers in this country who, in recognition of their oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, have taken a further oath to disobey any orders to disarm American citizens, arrest American citizens, incarcerate American citizens, when those citizens are only exercising their constitutional rights. There's 10 promises that the Oath Keepers take of orders that they promise to disobey. I, by the way, am working to get them to add one more to that list, and that's that they promise to disobey any order to engage in a war of aggression.
Well, I hope you're right. I think they'll use foreign troops to do this because I think they're too clever. They know that their own troops probably wouldn't do it.
Well, I'm not sure that they would get away with that. If they do that, I think you'll find the U.S. troops protecting us from the foreign troops. Hey, guys. Sadie, I know you enjoy playing. Oh, she loves that little dog. Yeah.
Playtime.
Yeah. They're loving it. Both tails wagging, they're playing, but they're a little distracting.
One big happy family.
Yeah.
Another question?
Yes.
Colonel Bowman, my question goes along with your letter to the Pentagon, and I thought that was a very bold statement you made at that time. We were at a precarious time with the Military Commissions Act and all those scary things that they were literally putting down on paper. I mean, that was the scary part. We know they do these things, believe these things, would do it, but to write it down was pretty shocking, and I think you had a great counter to that. But I always my view of the military, and I grew up in a defense contractor family, was that the military is run by the senior NCOs, the master sergeants, and the colonels. You know, your colonels are your operational commanders, and the only difference between a colonel and a general is the colonel won't play the game, keep his mouth shut, and become a member of the CFR.
Amen.
And have a globalist view of things, but they typically run things. So, and I've got a friend in here that's is another Vietnam pilot that's in the back over here, and you know, I just wanted to ask you, what do you think? How's the military fall on this? I mean, are the colonels with us? Are the NCOs with us? Is it just the four-star inner ring, you know, Pentagon generals that are for this, or how do you think it falls down?
Well, actually, during the Bush administration, it was obvious that we had a lot of four-star generals and admirals on our side. And if we had not had, there would have been an attack against Iran. But we had several four-star generals and admirals retire early or resign and publicly said that there would be no attack on Iran on their watch. As for the colonels and sergeants, they're a mixed bag like the rest of the population. But I think compared to the population at large, probably more of them are with us than you would find in the population at large. When I ran for Congress, my chief of staff, as I called him, and he still sort of is, and Veterans Affairs Advisor, is a grizzled sergeant from the Marine Corps who survived Khe Sanh in Vietnam. And the two of us make quite a team. And we're not alone. And it's hard to say, you know, what the ratios are. Probably the most prone to just go along and follow orders are the new recruits fresh out of boot camp. And a few years ago they took a survey of Marines fresh out of boot camp, and they were asked, if you were ordered to turn your guns on American citizens, would there be a circumstance under which you would obey that order? And about a quarter of them said yes, which is shocking to a lot of people. But about 3/4 of them said no, which is very encouraging to me. Because if there's any group likely to just go follow orders, it's Marine recruits right out of boot camp.
Norman.
But the higher you go up the chain of command, the more highly educated the person is, and the more wisdom they have gathered with age, particularly if they have seen combat themselves, and therefore the more likely they are to be on our side. There is a battle going on within the Pentagon, to be sure, and within the CIA for the heart and mind of this country. And so far it appears like we're on the winning side.
Come down to the microphone, please.
We have a question here. Sorry, can we
Yeah,
take this one?
go ahead.
Yes, sir. When it comes to the constitutional principle of government neutrality, respecting religion, wouldn't it
I'm
be
sorry.
best for...
The microphone is for the benefit of the listening audience around the country. Speak loudly for the benefit of those in this room.
Do I need to start over?
Yeah, start over. I didn't quite hear you.
So when it comes to the constitutional principle of government neutrality, respecting religion, wouldn't it be best for elected officials to not ask some God to bless America?
Well, I think that may be carrying it a little too far. The Constitution says that the government will not establish a state religion.
No, that's not
And
what
will not-
it says.
And will
It
not...
says the government shall not any religion. Establishment of any religion.
Yeah, that does
And
not...
your religion, it seems, still gets in the way of constitutional observance.
Well, I'm not sure, because the Constitution guarantees what we now have expanded into separation of church and state, and it guarantees us freedom of religion. It does not guarantee us freedom from religion.
Well,
And
I'm offended
if we
by
carried
the fact
that
God
out,
bless me and
if
bless
we
me.
carried that out and said that presidents and politicians could not ask God to bless America, that would be making atheism the state religion.
No,
And
it would
I'm
not.
against it.
It would not. Neutrality is where it's at. Neutrality.
I answered your question as I see it. Can we have another question?
Well, it's the only disagreement we have.
Okay, well, fine.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah, I like those. Hello? Can you hear me?
That, you won't hear any feedback from that.
Gotcha.
That is just for the radio. You'll have to speak up for the audience and for me.
Thank you. My name is Jim Ramsbottom. I've been in Austin for about 10 years. I've been in this so-called my own personal movement trying to help people for the last 5 years. I mean, I'm 55 years old. I was in the 53 lottery. I didn't go because of 4F, bad knee, high school.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's when I began looking at things as they were and realized that this is this is not right. And so I think that all the things that I hear, I'm sorry I was late, but what I'm here to discuss is we can get in arguments amongst each other, but yet there are so many people that just don't understand what the hell's going on. I mean, it sounds like something from outer space that what the truth is. Mm-hmm. And what I've been trying to do is like the Obama deception. I don't know how many of those I've given out.
All right.
And people keep coming. I was a conspiracy theorist. About 3 years ago, and all of a sudden people are coming to me to ask questions.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there seems like there's a gap between 35 and 45, age-year-old that like my daughter, 23, she gets it. I get it. The World War II vets get it. My father-in-law he was in Normandy. He gets it. And I mean, I sent him. The point is that I would like to know what do you feel? Because you can't start him with Alex. He's my man, but but I can't start him with that. I got to start soft.
Right. Well, okay, my answer to that
I understand what he's coming from.
you may have missed it. First of all, 35 to 45-year-olds are so busy working 2 and 3 jobs to try to support their family that they don't feel they have time for anything else, and they certainly don't want to listen to anything which will lessen their ability to support their family. So it's very hard. I have trouble like this with some of our kids, some of our kids-in-law, and it's a tough age. But what I have found works with them better than anything else is the same thing that works with congressmen and senators, and that's my 3-minute smoking gun video on Building 7. I talked about that probably before you came.
Well, I've watched Richard Gage. I mean, I've seen...
Well, Richard Gage takes 2 hours to say what I prove in 3 minutes with that video. You're not going to get a member of Congress or your 35-year-old neighbor to sit down for 2 hours and watch Richard Gage. But you can get him to sit down with you and watch a 3-minute video and then ask you questions about it. And that video is on our website, thepatriots.us, in downloadable form. You can download that 3-minute video onto a DVD and take it around with you and lobby Congress or your neighbor or whoever. And I encourage you to do so.
Because I feel like that we need to get those people on board, because they're the ones that's the mainstream right now that can lobby their Congress.
Okay,
right.
Another question, please.
Yes, my name is Cecil Taylor. Have you talked with any high-ranking generals or admirals who will not go along with martial law, and recently?
I have generals and admirals from all of the military services on the Patriots Advisory Board. As far as going along with martial law, I haven't discussed this with folks lately, but as I said, I am quite confident that indeed there is a split within the military, but I'm sure that the majority of the high-ranking officers are on our side and would not carry out martial law against American citizens exercising their constitutional rights.
Yes, Colonel Bowman. My name is Dr. David Berry. I'm an obstetrician and a maternal fetal medicine specialist here in town.
Great.
And between the age of 35 and 45.
Great. And I see some gals in the back wanting to know if you're available.
Yeah, he's single.
No.
The good ones are always taken, right?
Nope, divorced now.
Oh.
No, but sir, I see a whole lot of considerable amount of discontent within the people, within my patients, within my family, and no one knows what to do. Everyone has gone down the educational arm. The Patriots and the Truth Movement, I think, not to steal something from the PNAC documents, but something has to bring, some galvanizing event has to bring the Patriot community together.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that happening through an economic collapse? There's something drastic has to happen to have us not argue amongst ourselves and our libertarian individualist philosophies and come together under the same, under the same roof and actually do something to make our country back. What do you suppose, or what do you?
Well, I don't know if there will be one of these major catalyzing events to bring folks together. I'm doing what I can. I talked about this on the Alex Jones show today, and in all of my talks, I mentioned the need for us all to come together left and right, and that may not be the case here because this was put together a little bit at the last minute, but most of my talks around the country are co-sponsored by a wide variety of groups, including the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, the Ron Paul meetups, and the Dennis Kucinich meetups. And that to me is a good sign. It's what I'm trying to do. We're also co-sponsored often by the 9/11 Truth groups and a variety of peace groups, Veterans for Peace, Raging Grannies, and Code Pink, and so forth. So in addition to bringing together the left and the right, we're trying to bring together the natural allies of the 9/11 Truth movement, the Patriot movement, and the old line peace movement, because we're all against these wars. And is there going to be some catastrophe or some big event that's going to happen? That's beyond my pay grade. All I can do is do what I can do and make my little contribution to bringing folks together.
All right, I have some comments, and then it's something I wanted to draw out from you. Regarding the military, you expressed some hope that like 3/4 of the Marines would not turn on Americans, but that leaves a very large number of lesser educated Army to address, and many of them are from other nationalities, may not be as rooted in our constitutional principles as we would hope. That was one of the comments, because that's a large numbers of people who would be carrying out whatever might come down. The other was regarding the offense at God. I believe that there's nothing that a mature tolerance wouldn't address or have a thicker skin. And the other concern was I rile at the socialist medical plan that looks like it's trying to be pushed through. And I've been listening to some talks with doctors that have been against it and the concerns that I've seen in other nations. Mm-hmm. You mentioned a national health care.
Yes.
How would you see a national health care come down that's different from what Obama's trying to push through right now?
Well, I think I would go much further than Obama. Obama is offering, along with all the insurance companies and along with whatever insurance your employer may provide to you, which is one reason General Motors is in trouble, and we have so many corporations that are having a hard time competing with their counterparts in Europe, for example, is because they have to provide retirement and medical care, and it's a huge expense for their retirees. And that's a burden that we should relieve our corporations from. Now, a lot of what I propose is against corporate power, particularly monopoly corporate power. But at the same time, to be fair, we have to unburden our corporations who are unfairly trying to compete with those in countries where the government provides health care and retirement, and the corporation doesn't have to be bothered with that and burdened with it. So I would go much further than Obama, and I would say instead of having a bunch of insurance companies and maybe a public option where the government essentially acts as one more little insurance company, and you have doctors having to submit paperwork to dozens of different entities, and you have people being bounced back and forth between Medicare, Medicaid, the VA, private insurance companies, the government option, and all of that. I mean, the medical profession is already burdened with enormous paperwork, and we can relieve all that, get rid of all the bean counters and bureaucrats that are deciding what treatment you can have, just get rid of the insurance companies out of the whole thing, and make government the single payer. The government would not own the hospitals. The government would not employ the doctors and nurses. The government would not decide your treatment. The government would have one responsibility, and that's to pay the bill. That's a single-payer national health program.
Where would that come to end of life or late stage surgeries or treatments or decisions? I mean, these are some of the concerns I heard the medical establishment talking about when you talk about using the money effectively. Obviously, what they're talking about without saying it is preserving the young who can give them money through taxes and eliminating the elderly who are a financial burden.
Well, I don't read that as eliminating the elderly and denying care to the elderly. Doctors would make that kind of decision. There are teams of doctors that sort of decide what care Medicare will provide, for example. And I'm sure that there would have to be a team of doctors to decide what the boundaries of care are that the government would provide under the single-payer system. And if a person wanted something beyond that, whether it's cosmetic surgery or whether it's, some kind of a triple bypass for somebody who's 98 years old and has terminal cancer or something, and it doesn't fall within the guidelines, they can do that on their own nickel. But the government would have to have certain guidelines. There are guidelines now. Almost all seniors now are under Medicare, and there are certainly guidelines there. So I don't see that we're giving up anything or losing anything. And, the Republican scare tactics talk about, taking away choice, and they talk about you don't want your health care governed by government bureaucrats. Well, right now it's governed by insurance company bureaucrats. I'd much rather have the government doing it. And I know lots and lots of doctors who want a single-payer national health care program, and they have their own organization, by the way.
Okay, we got another call, another questioner.
Dr. Bowman, thank you so much for what you're doing, for your service to our country now, and your service in the military. I was just wondering, I want to ask you a question a little bit off topic from what you've been talking about, but have you ever had an occasion to work with and meet Chuck Yeager? I think he was a great American hero.
I knew him peripherally, never really got to work with him. Yes, I agree with you. He was certainly a great pilot.
Dr. Bowman, what do you think the most effective way is of dealing with Monsanto and bioengineered foods?
Oh boy, that's a real biggie. I mentioned this in great detail on my website. There's a page on thepatriots.us which is called Issues A to Z. And I deal with something like 100 different issues. Monsanto's Terminator seeds are one. Their new, they have a new successor to the Terminator seed, which is a seed that is fertile if you treat it with a Monsanto chemical every year to, anyway. The whole thing of that, and when you combine that with what they're trying to do now, they're trying to get agriculture completely under the control of the giant agribusiness companies like Archer Daniels Midland. And Monsanto itself is trying to get a monopoly on the world food supply. We simply cannot allow that to happen, and there are related things when it comes to livestock. The National Animal Identification Program is designed so that every piece of livestock has an ID implanted in it, and that livestock must remain at a certain location, and if it leaves, like if a farmer takes a prize pig to the county fair to show it, or takes his bull into the neighbor's pasture to fertilize one of the cows, or, anything like that, they have to fill out a lot of paperwork for the government. So they're extremely burdensome to the small farmers with some livestock. The big corporations like Tyson with their millions of zillions of chickens are exempt from these requirements. So the big growers, the big livestock producers are exempt, but the small ones have to do all of this burdensome stuff, which is going to force them out of business. And so, again, it's a move toward monopoly. It's the same thing that they have already accomplished with newspapers and television stations and radio stations, and they're trying to do it with our food supply, and we can't let them do it. And so we have to educate those around us. I'm sorry that in the time I had today, I couldn't talk about everything and raise all these issues, but we must demand that our legislators, President Obama, everybody we can get to, call a halt to this madness, and we don't want a monopoly of our food supply, and we don't want the small farmers being driven out of business. There's already too many of them.
Okay, we've got another question coming up right now. Another question.
I'm glad you brought this up because we've been going to the farmers market at the Burger Center every Saturday. About 6 weeks ago, the feds showed up and tried to arrest somebody that was selling raw milk. Now, this upset a lot of people. I don't know if you realize that goat's milk, you can get a permit for it, but cow's milk, you cannot. And so
just because the cow's milk big producers have more political clout than those with goat's milk.
Exactly. So what we've been doing is working with the farmers, and we're starting a cooperative, by the way, in case any of you are interested. So there was this lady, well-to-do, from Westlake, Diamond Up, cared about her purchases. So we said to her, this is what we've been doing. We said to her, look, you know, that's a beautiful squash. How long have you been coming here? Well, about 3 years. And I said, well, you may not be able to do that much longer. So we've drawn a lot of people in. It's like we watch the cat stalk the bird and return to apathy till someone close becomes the bird. So what can we do? I think we can find something that affects the people that we're talking to.
Yeah, good idea. And by the way, if any of you have any ideas for how we can help defeat some of these things, whether it's the Real ID Act or the same thing for animals or Monsanto's monopoly, email me your ideas and you know, we'll distribute them to folks. We'll if you have any ideas for our website after you read the issues, something you disagree with or new information or something that needs updating, email me. I read them. Oh,
one more, I'm sorry. I really do appreciate it. When I saw you on Alex Jones today, I said, I hopped in my car and flew down here. Okay, what I wanted to ask you was, when are we going to teach, I mean, when are the third world countries going to learn how to, every time they start learning how to fish, that's when we deprive them and take their natural resources. Yeah. And that is a big problem in the economic hitmen that we have out there. Yeah. And that continues and continues. And to me, that's eugenics. I mean, there's no reason why anyone in this world should be starving right now.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, what do you feel about that?
Well, you know, there are a lot of folks out there working on, you know, world hunger and so forth. You know, we do our little thing. We've adopted a number of kids overseas on these little programs. You send them money every month and whatnot. But right now, I feel that if we let the United States of America go down the tubes as a constitutional republic, that the chances for the world coming out of the poverty and hunger and bad health and lack of clean water and all the rest of that, which is in large measure because of our multinational corporations interfering in those countries. If we let our country go down the tubes, there's not much help for the rest of the world. To save the world, we first have to save the United States of America.
Talking on the right side now. Yes, I watched a good campaign go down with Ron Paul. I was at a rally, and I realized that we needed a media blitz. We got to get around this controlled media government. And I just threw out the idea to someone who was standing there beside me. He says, "When do we start launching the balloons?" And they control the TV, they control the radios, and I wouldn't want to see the same thing go down with your campaign. So when do we start launching the balloons with these little flyers on them all over? When do we start having the big billboards with your philosophy, with your ideas on it? And I'd love to see a billboard about 50 feet long or whatever, you know, with this on it. And also banners, whatever we can get going to get around this controlled news media.
Yeah, well, those are great ideas, and email them to me, and I'd love to do it. Right now, our progress is getting enough money to get gas to get to Dallas, but yeah, there are any number of things that we could do with enough money, and certainly more of that kind of publicity is part of it. When I ran for Congress, we spent what we could on publicity, and we did have billboards, and we did 30-second spots on television and so forth. But I totally ran out of money, and I have given the Patriots organization well over $1 million since I started it 27 years ago. I'm out of money and out of borrowing power. We're in debt for well over $1 million. My wife and I, personally. So I can't give the Patriots any more money. So it operates on what it brings in. And but certainly, every once in a while we get somebody that says, here's something, and I'm going to pay for an ad in the paper, or I'm going to pay to do this or that. And when we get those kind of benefactors, boy, we take advantage of it and try and get the word out there. There's no question that we have to do that. So far, I have been depending mainly on the pebble in the pond thing. I drop my pebble in the pond, and you guys have to do likewise, and together we can make some waves. This is not something that I can accomplish on my own. And, you know, even if somebody gave us $1 million, that would last a while, but it's not going to beat down the billions of dollars that the insurance company and the pharmaceutical manufacturers and Monsanto and all the others can bring to bear. So we have to depend on the fact that there are thousands of times more of us than there are of them. And if we all get to work and drop our own pebbles in the pond, we'll make some waves, and eventually we will win. But keep those ideas coming, and I'll make note of that.
Your timing is good.
Not anymore. In the back?
The mic around here?
Russia?
Where's the mic? Yeah.
I'm not sure if you addressed this already, but you speak on chemtrails, and you know, we don't hear much coverage on what's going on.
I haven't mentioned chemtrails, and it's because, you know, as an old fighter pilot, you know, I'm looking up there all the time, and I'm watching the skies, and for the last several years I've been looking for chemtrails. And I haven't seen anything in the sky that, to me, didn't look like natural contrails caused by differences in the atmosphere and airliners or jet aircraft or whatever. I know that there are a lot of people who say, hey, this is obvious, we have seen chemtrails, we know about chemtrails, and they're different, and we have proof. And that may be, it's just that I haven't seen it myself. And so I guess like on a lot of other issues where I don't have any first-hand knowledge, I'm agnostic on it. And I'm willing to be convinced one way or the other.
a little bit of follow-up on what the man back here was saying before. Of course, there are corporations and businesses that are, and international banking concerns that are involved with setting up loans to different entities, governments, and then taking them over that way by destroying the economy so they can foreclose on the accounts. But also, I just wanted to mention, I think probably a lot of people here know, and there's plenty of books that mention it, organizations like the Trilateral Commission, their basic mission statement is to stop countries from being able to, third world countries from being able to benefit from their own infrastructure. I think I read that even the Shah of Iran was brought out of power through Brzezinski after being set up by Carter's administration, because he was actually trying to get them to be able to benefit by having some nuclear power and not being totally dependent on the oil, which they couldn't control. So the Trilateral Commission by mission statement, as well as CFR, Bilderbergs, and numerous other interconnected groups.
They do seem to want control, and they do certainly, particularly through the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, interfere in the economic activities of nations, particularly third world countries, and keep them dependent. And there are economists who have solutions to these problems. And they're not easy, they're complex, but they are possible. It just takes the will to do it. And so we need to change the direction of the IMF and the World Bank and get them solving problems, not creating them. And if we can't do that, like I had Obama say in the inaugural address I wrote for him, we should abolish them. And I think in conclusion, I just would like to say we've talked about a lot of problems, and there are problems out there, and we are facing powerful enemies with lots and lots of money. But I am optimistic because we, the American people, there's a lot of us, we have resources of our own, we have brain power. Between all of us, we've got economic power, and this is the fight we can win. We the people can win. We the people must win. Amen. We the people will win. Thank you. If some of you have recently finished filling out your Patriot sign-up cards, please make sure they get into Maggie's basket. If you've been writing a generous check to the Patriots, make sure that gets in the basket too. And we thank you for whatever contributions you've been able to give tonight.